The fans' heart raced with excitement when they heard that Keanu Reeves would be attending an event. They knew Keanu was a huge star, an icon worldwide. Yet the thought of seeing him in person, of possibly getting to meet him, felt like a dream come true. They had imagined for years what it would be like to speak with him, even if only for a few moments. To shake his hand, to share a word or two, would be a memory they'd treasure forever. In their mind, the meeting would be perfect. Keanu, the man they admired, would surely be warm and genuine, but when the moment finally came, everything fell short. Keanu, standing with a microphone in hand, approached the crowd, and the fans' excitement hit its peak. The atmosphere was electric. People were snapping pictures, and the air buzzed with anticipation. But when the fan finally stepped forward, when they called out to Keanu with everything they had, the interaction was not what they'd hoped for. Keanu simply offered a polite smile, answered a few quick questions, and then moved on. There was no warmth in his voice, no connection. He didn't pause long enough to offer anything more than a distant acknowledgement. The fan stood there, frozen for a moment, unable to fully process what had just happened. They'd expected more of the warmth, the kindness they had seen in his movies. But instead, Keanu's cold, distant demeanor left them feeling deflated, as if they had been invisible all along. It was as if the star they had admired for so long wasn't even the person they had imagined him to be. He's such a big star. But why does he have to be so cold and distant? The fan thought, their disappointment turning to frustration. The brief moment of contact with Keanu felt fleeting and empty. The fan had imagined a different version of him, one that was warm and kind, not the distant figure standing before them. Turning point. The fan couldn't shake the anger bubbling inside them. They felt betrayed by the reality of meeting their idol and could not let go of the frustration. This anger quickly spilled out onto social media. They started posting negative comments about Keanu, venting their disappointment for all to see. "So cold and arrogant for someone so famous," they wrote. They couldn't help but share their bitter thoughts online, watching as the reactions from others began to flood in. The fan began to question Keanu's true nature. "This isn't the Keanu I thought I knew," they posted on Twitter, now fueled by a sense of outrage. With every post, the fans' anger grew stronger, and soon their posts became more biting and harsh. Keanu might be a huge star, but his arrogance is impossible to ignore, they shared, each word like a weight thrown onto their growing resentment. Keanu's brief and indifferent interaction had turned into a symbol of everything the fan now despised, an image that no longer seemed as kind or genuine as they once thought. As days passed, the fans' resentment only deepened. The more they thought about their brief encounter with Keanu, the more they felt the sting of disappointment. In their mind, Keanu wasn't the warm, humble man they had imagined. He was nothing more than a pretender, hiding behind the fame that people admired without truly knowing who he was. Driven by this growing frustration, the fan took to social media once more, eager to share their thoughts with the world. They began posting more frequently, each post a harsh critique of Keanu and of the very idea of celebrity. People treat him like a hero, but what has he really done? "Just another famous face with nothing to offer," the fan wrote, their words dripping with disdain. They argued that Keanu's fame was built on nothing more than luck, that there was no real heroism behind his popularity, only the shallow illusion of greatness. Others began to take notice. As the fans' posts gained traction, some fellow users chimed in. But instead of offering support, they too began to voice their own grievances about Keanu. "He's just another actor pretending to be someone he's not," one user commented. "It's ridiculous how people worship celebrities like him." The fan was pleased to see that their anger was resonating with others. It gave them a sense of validation, as though they were finally calling out the truth that everyone else was too afraid to see. The fan didn't care that they had never truly known Keanu. They had seen enough to form an opinion, one that was now fueled by their disappointment and anger. And so they continued to post, each message becoming harsher than the last. Keanu is nothing but a puppet in the entertainment industry. He's not a real person, he's a product, and that's all he'll ever be, they wrote, with a sense of finality. The fan no longer saw Keanu as a human being, but rather as an object, a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world of fame. They began to feel justified in their growing contempt, telling themselves that it wasn't wrong to dehumanize someone who had only shown them indifference. In their mind, Keanu wasn't deserving of the admiration he received. They had seen through the illusion, and they were more than willing to expose the truth to anyone who would listen. As they posted, they became more and more disconnected from reality. They saw themselves as the only one with a clear understanding of who Keanu really was, and they judged him harshly, convinced that their judgment was the only valid one. There was no room for nuance, no room for empathy. The fans' world had become black and white. Keanu was no longer a person, just a celebrity who deserved none of the respect people blindly gave him, and in their continued attacks, the fans' respect for Keanu was gone. It was replaced by a growing arrogance of their own, a belief that they had seen through the veil of fame and could now see people like Keanu for what they truly were, nothing more than empty figures in a world that worshipped the wrong things. The fan was no longer just disappointed. They were on a mission to expose Keanu, and every post, every comment, fed their belief that they were in the right. One afternoon, as fate would have it, the fan crossed paths with Keanu once again. This time, it wasn't in a bustling event or crowded public space, but outside, in the quiet stillness of the street. Keanu walked alone, a rare sight for such a public figure. The fan's heart raced, their pulse quickened. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The chance to confront Keanu, to speak the words they had been harboring for so long. Feeling a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation, the fan approached Keanu. Their steps quickened until they were standing just a few feet away from the actor. Keanu's face was calm, his eyes focused ahead, seemingly unaware of the fan's presence. The fan took a deep breath, gathering their thoughts before speaking. "Keanu!" the fan called out, a touch of both confidence and challenge in their voice. "I've been waiting to speak with you. You don't know me, but I've shared my thoughts about you on social media. I don't think you're the hero everyone says you are, and I've called you out for it. But now I want to hear your side." Keanu stopped walking, turning slowly to face the fan. His expression didn't change, remaining serene and composed. The fan, filled with a rush of anticipation, almost expected to see anger, frustration, or even arrogance in his eyes. But there was none of that. Keanu simply listened, his posture open and receptive. "I've criticized you for hiding behind your fame," the fan continued. "I've said you're just like the rest of them, pretending to be something you're not." Keanu stood there quietly, absorbing every word without interrupting. His calm demeanor remained unshaken, as though he were listening not just to the words, but to the emotions behind them. The fans' words, harsh as they were, seemed to carry no weight for Keanu. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. He didn't get defensive. For a moment, there was only silence between them. The fans' frustration began to rise, but Keanu's quiet presence was almost disarming. It was as if Keanu didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to defend himself or justify his actions. His stillness was more powerful than any response could have been. The fan, expecting a fiery argument or a defensive outburst, found themselves at a loss for words. After what felt like an eternity, Keanu simply nodded once, acknowledging the fan's presence. Without uttering a single word, he turned and walked away, leaving the fan standing there, stunned and unsure of how to process the encounter. The fan's mind raced. This wasn't the confrontation they had imagined. There were no harsh words, no emotional outbursts, no grand gestures. It was as if Keanu's silence spoke volumes, far more than any heated exchange ever could. The fan stood frozen for a moment, watching Keanu disappear into the distance. There was something unsettling about the encounter. The fan had expected anger or a fight, but instead they were left with a deep sense of confusion. Why hadn't Keanu reacted the way they had anticipated? Why had he remained so calm, so composed, when the fan had been so sure of their own righteousness? As the fan stood there, a feeling they couldn't quite place began to stir within them. The anger, the resentment, they still felt those things, but they now had a new question to consider. What did it mean when someone responded to cruelty with nothing but silence? What did it mean when someone, despite all the criticism and negativity, remained unshaken? The fan had come into this encounter seeking answers, but now they were left with even more questions. Keanu's quiet demeanor had thrown them off balance, and despite their best efforts to condemn him, they found themselves beginning to reflect, perhaps for the first time, on their own behavior and whether their anger had been justified in the first place. A few weeks had passed since the unexpected encounter, but the fan could not shake the thoughts that had taken root in their mind. Keanu's unshakable composure, his quiet demeanor, it had all weighed heavily on them. There had been no harsh words, no grand justifications, and yet that brief interaction had caused a shift in the fan's perspective. The more they reflected on it, the more they realized how wrong they had been. One evening, the fan found themselves at another cafe, a place they frequented. The place was quiet, with only a few people scattered around, the soft hum of conversations blending with the faint sound of clinking cups and silverware. As the fans sipped their drink, they couldn't help but notice a familiar face in the corner of the room. It was Keanu, sitting by the window, casually reading a book, completely unaware of the fans' presence. The fans' heart raced again. This wasn't just another coincidence. It felt like the universe was giving them a second chance, an opportunity to make things right. They hesitated for a moment, uncertain about how to approach him this time. But as they looked at Keanu, they felt the weight of their previous judgments, the harsh words they had written online, and the anger that had clouded their judgment. Taking a deep breath, the fan stood up and walked over to Keanu's table. Keanu glanced up from his book as they approached, a faint, knowing smile curling at the corners of his lips. It was a smile without malice, without sarcasm, but one that seemed to invite understanding. I just wanted to say something. The fan began, their voice uncertain but sincere. Keanu set his book down and gave the fan his full attention, his eyes calm and welcoming. It was as though he had been waiting for this moment, though he said nothing. I've been thinking a lot about the last time we spoke, about how I treated you, and about how you treated me, the fan continued, their words stumbling but earnest. I've realized I was wrong. I was angry, and I didn't really understand. I didn't understand who you really are. Keanu listened, his expression still, calm and unbothered, as if he were simply absorbing the words, letting them settle without judgment. I thought I knew what you were like. I thought you were just another celebrity hiding behind a perfect image. But after that day, I can see I was wrong. You didn't fight me, didn't argue or defend yourself. You just stood there. And it made me think, maybe I don't know what I thought I knew. The fan paused, feeling a surge of emotions, regret, pride, realization. Keanu remained silent for a moment, his eyes reflecting a kind of understanding that the fan couldn't quite describe. Then finally, he spoke, his voice as soft and steady as ever. "Sometimes people can't be who you expect them to be," Keanu said, his words simple but profound. "But when we show them respect, even when they don't show it to us, we make a difference. In the end, it's not about being right, it's about being kind and finding peace in that." The fan felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over them, as if Keanu's words had not just hit them, but had penetrated deep into their soul. It was a lesson in humility, in understanding that true strength didn't come from power or fame, but from the quiet ability to remain compassionate in the face of negativity. "I've been angry for so long," the fan whispered, more to themselves than to Keanu. "But I never really thought about why it mattered so much. Maybe I needed to let go of the anger." Keanu gave a slight nod, the softest smile curling on his lips. "Letting go doesn't always mean you forget," he said, his voice gentle. "It just means you choose to move forward." The fan sat there, speechless for a moment. The weight of their previous bitterness had been replaced by a kind of peace they hadn't known they were searching for. Keanu's quiet power had done what no words, no arguments, or no social media posts could have done. It had unlocked a new understanding within them. As they parted ways, the fan walked out of the cafe feeling lighter than they had in a long time. The regret they felt was still there, but it was no longer the same feeling of anger and self-righteousness. It was the kind of regret that led to growth, the kind that would help them become a better version of themselves. Keanu had shown them something deeper than fame. He had shown them the strength in silence, the wisdom in humility, and the power in respect. It was a lesson that would stay with the fan for a long time. And as they left the cafe, they realized that sometimes the most powerful lessons are the quiet ones. A week had passed since the life-altering encounter with Keanu. The fan, deeply moved by the conversation and Keanu's profound wisdom, found themselves reflecting on the words he had shared. Slowly, the bitterness and resentment that had once consumed them began to fade. They spent days thinking about how they had judged a man they barely knew, driven by assumptions and prejudice. The realization stung deeply, but it was a stinging truth that led them to a place of clarity. Sitting alone at their desk, the fan pulled out their phone. They opened the app, their heart pounding as they scrolled through the old posts, the critical comments, the hurtful words directed at Keanu. It had been easy to lash out from behind a screen, but now, face to face with the truth, it all seemed so pointless. The fan stared at the posts for a long time before slowly beginning to delete them one by one. But that wasn't enough. They needed to do more. They needed to correct their wrongs in a way that felt genuine. With a deep breath, the fan started typing. "I owe you an apology, Keanu," they wrote. "I let my own misconceptions cloud my judgment, and for that I am truly sorry. You are not just a celebrity, you are a human being with grace, patience, and strength that goes far beyond anything I could have imagined. You taught me that true. Greatness doesn't come from fame, but from how we treat others and how we carry ourselves in the face of adversity. I was wrong to judge you. I hope you can forgive me." The fan stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. There was no guarantee that Keanu would ever see it, but they felt a sense of relief, of release, from simply putting their apology into the universe. But to their surprise, within a few hours, they received a notification, a reply from Keanu. "Happiness isn't in perfection, it's in change," the message read. "Everyone can change. Your change matters to me." The fan's heart skipped a beat. The simplicity of his response, the depth of his words, resonated with them on a level they hadn't expected. Keanu hadn't just acknowledged their apology, he had validated their journey of change. It was a reminder that no one was beyond redemption, and that growth, even in small steps, was something to be celebrated. From that moment on, the fan made a vow to live differently. They realized that true power wasn't in tearing others down or holding on to bitterness. It was in lifting others up, in showing kindness, and in giving people the respect they deserved. They took Keanu's teachings to heart: patience, respect, humility, and began integrating those values into their daily life. The fan had once seen Keanu as just another famous face, but now they understood that he was much more than that. Keanu was a leader, not just in the public eye, but in the way he carried himself in every interaction. He wasn't perfect, but he was someone who had earned their respect, not because of his fame, but because of his humanity. Over the next few months, the fan noticed something changing inside them. They treated others with more patience, kindness, and understanding. They no longer judged people based on assumptions, but took the time to really get to know them. The negativity they once harbored was replaced by a growing sense of peace. They were no longer the same person who had lashed out in anger. Instead, they were someone who had learned from their mistakes, someone who valued personal growth and self-improvement. Every day, the fan thought back to the lesson Keanu had taught them. Everyone can change, he had said, and with each passing day, they worked hard to become the best version of themselves, living by the values Keanu had unwittingly instilled in them. In the end, the fan realized that the greatest lesson Keanu had taught wasn't about fame, but about the power of self-reflection and the courage to change. And so, as the fan continued their journey of transformation, they knew that they would carry Keanu's wisdom with them always, not just as a fan, but as someone who had been touched by the quiet strength of a true leader.